Добрий день. Можна вас запитати, ви звідки і куди?
З Констахи.
І що там?
Там піздець. Не советуємо нікому.
This is War Map. On the Konstantinovsky directions, the assault units of the south grouping of troops continue to clear the southwestern outskirts of Konstantinovka, occupying an increasing area of this part of the city. The northeastern part of the built-up area, separated by the river Krivoy Torets, remains the scene of fierce clashes of small groups. There, the tactical position of the AFU is somewhat better, and there are still clashes in the opposite direction. As before, the eastern flank remains a source of difficulties, as here the Ukrainian formations control the settlement of Krasny and the adjacent heights, as well as the outskirts of Chasovoy Yar. This allows them to strike at the supply routes of the units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation operating in the northeastern part of Konstantinovka. But to the west of the city, after the capture of Rokosovoy, Russian units have advanced into the neighboring Dolga Valley. This village has been the scene of clashes of small groups for some time, and judging by the publication of photos with flags, now a large part of it is already under the stable control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and cleared of the AFU. Advance near Kupiansk. Russian units are successfully advancing on the Kupiansk direction, reducing the Ukrainian formation's foothold to the east of Oskol. The AFU command previously withdrew some forces to the neighboring Boryuk direction and is now returning personnel to the area of Kupiansk. This may indicate preparations for resuming active operations in the city and its environs. Reports from the area also mention an increase in the number of strikes on the logistics of Russian units at a distance of 40 to 50 kilometers from the contact line. At the same time, Russian troops have managed to significantly improve their tactical position in the vicinity of Kupiansk-Uzlovka, as well as Kurilovka. The expansion of the zone of activity of small groups, and subsequently the zone of control, has allowed them to take pictures with flags in honor of Russia Day. There are also local successes in the villages to the south. There, fighters of the Russian armed forces have occupied at least part of the high-rise buildings in Kovsharovka and cleared the northern outskirts of Novosinovo. The pocket near Glushkovka is being reduced, where Russian assault units are also advancing both to the northeast of the settlement and within its borders. Between the aforementioned settlements and the river Oskol, there is a forested area, where the AFU still maintains an organized presence and from which they are likely to attempt to launch counterattacks. In turn, as the AFU's foothold to the east of Oskol is being reduced, Russian troops will have the opportunity to free up forces and increase activity to the west of the river, including in the area of Kupiansk itself, or transfer forces to other directions in the zone of responsibility of the west group of troops. Advance in the border area. Units of the North Group have been fighting in the vicinity of Malaya Korchakovka for several weeks with the aim of reaching a large forested area. Despite frequent counterattacks by the AFU, they have managed to advance on a relatively wide front line here. At the approaches to Kotnya and Pisarevka, units of the Russian armed forces are also losing several positions, from the side of Korchakovka and the forest to the north. Thus, a wedge about 10 kilometers wide is being formed. If the Ukrainian formations fail to withstand the onslaught of Russian assault troops here, then with the entry into the forested area between Kotnya and Mogritsa, the Russian troops will gain shelter from the ubiquitous drones and have the opportunity to increase the offensive to the north of Sum on a wider front line. On the eastern flank, there are also successes. The AFU has been driven out of a stronghold between Gornal and Zapsel, and south of Miropol, another ravine and part of a forested area have come under the control of Russian units. It is precisely from this side that the advance towards the aforementioned forested area in the direction of Mogritsa is taking place. But there, the obstacle becomes Bolshaya Rybika, which is currently a forward defense node of the Ukrainian armed forces. As with other sectors in their area of responsibility, the command of the North Group successfully uses the tactic of tearing apart the enemy's forces, organizing tactical advances on different sections of several directions with varying frequency, and judging by the stability of local advances, the tactic is quite effective. New advances of the armed forces of Ukraine. On the Dnepropetrovsk directions, Ukrainian formations are still infiltrating in several areas. As before, small groups of the enemy are operating in the vicinity of the populated area of Berezove, where they arrive from the side of Orestopol, mainly on foot. The tactic used by the enemy here is not new and is an obvious development of the infiltration. The armed forces of Ukraine are sending small groups into the zone near the border of the Dnepropetrovsk region and supplying them with drones. However, there are no significant territorial losses yet. Basically, only the gray zone is expanding, in which both AFU infiltration groups operate, and mop-up operations are carried out both on foot and by drone strikes with subsequent control. Exactly because the small groups of the AFU are covered by drone operators, it is not always possible to approach and verify the destruction of personnel. It is easier to hit the shelter again until all signs of life are eliminated. Continuing to send infantry in small groups for several months, the AFU is pursuing the goal of slowing down the advance of the Vostok group of troops and diverting attention from the neighboring direction, where the units of the group have been successfully advancing further west over the past few weeks. Until next update.